Michael Bennett indicted Friday by a Harris County, Texas grand jury. This is for injury to a elderly individual, specifically a woman 66 years old, a paraplegic who was working the Super Bowl on February 5th back in 2017. A lot of questions here, John. We kind of hit on it on Friday, but more has come out. What is the latest on Michael Bennett as we stand here on this Monday?
Well, he surrendered as expected in court today. So he was taken into custody, $10,000 bail, which obviously will not be a problem for Michael Bennett. And he should be released in a couple hours, but just part of the process that obviously had to happen. I think the key point is the judge allowed him. He lives in Hawaii, so he's going to be able to go back to his home and travel for any upcoming legal proceedings that, in theory, would allow him to do off-season work in Philadelphia. I don't see why he couldn't do that. So basically it's just another step in the fact that he was indicted. Now we'll see what the prosecution has. And Michael hired Rusty Hardin, probably the most famous criminal defense attorney in Houston, did the Roger Clemens case, the Adrian Peterson case. So he's certainly going to be well represented.
John, the unusual aspect of this is twofold. It happened over a year ago, number one. Number two, in a society that essentially has video and photos. I mean, if you went to the Super Bowl, you could find yourself on a blown-up poster, your face in the crowd.
Panoramic shot, yep.
And they could say, hey, there I was. There is no video, no picture, no evidence of any kind. So is this highly unusual?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we all jump. Any of us who've been to a Super Bowl, and I've been to quite a few, I mean, the security is outrageous. Even us, as members of the media, we have to scan in and out everywhere we go. There's obviously cameras all over the place. Everybody brings up Tom Brady's jersey. Well, the reason they solved that case is because of video. It's everywhere. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a big hurdle for the prosecution. Why? There's a number of questions you have to ask, just common sense questions. Why is there no video? Why is there a witness who was a police officer that didn't apprehend Bennett at the time? He thought it was a crime. Well, that, to me, is incredulous. And a lot of other things that you mentioned. Why did it take 14 months? And then you have the fact that the Houston police chief, Art Acevedo, was so almost, I don't know, editorializing was how I described it, which I think is incredibly unfair, the way he described Michael Bennett. And if you felt that way, think about this, guys. If you felt that way and felt he was that kind of degenerate, what the heck took you so long again? We go back to the 14 months.
Right, I think that's the next question. I think the next question is, why did this case take so long to get to where we are today?
Well, they can't claim they were shorthanded, and they were just prioritizing other cases. And they recently hired, I think, 20 new detectives. So that's their excuse. But then if you claim some of the hurtful things Acevedo said about Michael Bennett, you would think you would want to prioritize it if you felt that way. So I think I would just say this. Rusty Hardin's chomping at the bit to get into court. I don't think ultimately it will ever get there. I certainly think there'll be a deal worked out. I said from day one, I can't imagine Michael Bennett spending a day in jail over this. Perhaps you have a plea bargain, some kind of fine. But ultimately, I think from the Eagles' perspective, I think the biggest issue is going to be, does the NFL get involved, and do they suspend him under the personal conduct policy?
Right. I mean, at this point, would you lean towards him missing games due to suspension?
I can never say never, because a video does pop up and it's an ugly situation. Well, certainly he's going to he's going to have some suspended games, and there's no question about it. But as far as his history, it's not. There's not a continued history. This is not a repeat offender time and time again. So I would think if we take the Houston Police Department and the District Attorney's Office at their word, and there is no video, the worst case would be a game or two, I would imagine.
I'm reading some of the comments that have come in over the weekend on the story that you wrote at 973ESPN.com, and one of the questions that keeps coming up is, the fact that the Eagles, let go of Vinny Curry. They hadn't at the time had Chris Long. I guess we'll have news on that coming up here in a minute. Did they go down a path that they didn't need to go down by bringing a guy in here to kind of upset the apple cart?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. They had no idea this was a possibility, and Howie Roseman said that today in Orlando. And he was also asked if he thinks the Seahawks kind of put one over on him, and he made it very clear how much he trusts John Snyder. He doesn't believe they knew anything about it. So I think everybody was kind of blindsided. I was at the NovaCare Complex on Friday when it all came down, and I can say 100% the Eagles had no idea. I mean, they were stunned, just like everybody else. So I don't think you can look at it that way and say they knew this was coming, they took a chance. That's certainly not true. Unfortunately, these things happen, and the Eagles will go through the process and hope everything's cleared up by September. And I think if that's the case, and I think it will be the case, ultimately, I think as a football player, he's was a prudent pickup, and it was a good decision.
Yeah, the people out there that say release him or they should cut him, that's a rush to judgment, isn't it, John?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's ridiculous. I just gave you all some of the questions we need answered, and that's another thing Howie Roseman said. Look, that's what this country is. It's innocent until proven guilty. He hasn't been convicted of anything. All he's been is accused, indicted by a grand jury, and as I said, there's some issues on the potential evidence the Houston District Attorney says they have. And we'll see how that part of it shakes out. But let's be honest, Michael's controversial. He's another player that has kneeled during the national anthem. He's very socially active on some things that rub certain people the wrong way. So they're going to jump to conclusions, at least a certain group. But the Eagles are obviously not among that group.
His appearance in court today, or by saying he surrenders, does that suggest that he's guilty? I mean, just could you clear that up for what his court appearance meant today, and if that infers anything?
No. If you're indicted, you have to surrender, or you're going to be arrested. There was a warrant out for his arrest. So that's the part where he was taken into custody, and as I said, bail was set at $10,000, which is certainly not a lot. It's nothing to someone of the means of Michael Bennett. You got to post 10% of that, so all he has to do to walk out today is post $1,000, and he will be walking out. And then it's innocent until proven guilty, as we said. That's what this country is, and it's, as they say in the legal community, you can indict a ham sandwich. Just because you've been indicted of something doesn't mean you're guilty of something.
And you said it caught the Eagles by surprise. Roseman's comments then basically clear up that it caught Seattle by surprise, too, because there were people out there trying to throw the theory out, well, Seattle knew this was going to happen, so that's why, they acted in bad faith.
Yeah, I mean, that's the conspiracy theorist. No, I don't think anybody knew this was going to happen, and that might be an issue with Michael with the NFL, because if you do have a situation where you think you might be in trouble, you're supposed to make someone aware, whether it's your team or the league itself. He certainly didn't do that. Now, for all I know, he didn't know he was potentially in trouble. That's a possibility as well. But if he knew there was a chance that he was going to be indicted, if he knew he was under investigation, well, the NFL could certainly take that into its sort of weighing of the issue in thinking about a potential suspension. That could hurt him. But the Eagles certainly didn't know about it, and as I said, they do not believe Seattle knew about it. So from their standpoint, Michael certainly didn't make anyone aware that this was a possibility.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, at JF McMullen on Twitter. John, do you foresee any scenario that the Eagles would end up having to release him?
I think the only scenario would be video of him truly shoving through a 66-year-old in a wheelchair, knocking it over to the point where it was so ugly there would be a public relations backlash. Then I could see him being released. Outside of that, and I remind you again, Houston Police claims there is no video. No, I don't think there's any way they're going to release him.
On the flip side of that, you got Chris Long, according to Adam Kaplan, who tweets out earlier that there's been some speculation on his future. League sources confirming that he has told the team that he is playing. Does that mean he is playing for the Eagles?
Yeah, I'll go one further. Howie Roseman confirmed it, so that's a great league source. Yeah, he'll be back with the Eagles. He had already signed an extension, and that's what I kind of pointed out. I thought the strangest thing of the Mike Silver report was the fact that, Chris had already signed the restructure. You guys were going, I think I talked to Josh about it. These things are not one-sided. The Eagles can't restructure a deal without Chris's permission. So he had to sign that contract. He did sign that contract, which was a clear indication he was going to come back. And he is coming back, and he's going to be a member of the Eagles.
All right, so that's what's happening with the Birds. Chris Long tells the Eagles will play, and the latest on Michael Bennett. Before we move on to some NFL news and notes, John, is there anything we should add in the Michael Bennett situation? Because it is kind of a hairy, tangled mess at this point.
No, I think, the most important part is the fact that bail was set so low, and he is going to be able to travel back and forth from his home to Houston for any potential future legal proceedings. And as I said, I think the end game is working out some kind of deal where you'll possibly see a fine. I can't imagine it would add up to anything more than that unless, as I said, video magically appears.
Was there something over the weekend that I read that his sister or somebody had video?
Well, she had some video, but it didn't show a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, that was his sister, who was very upset. And I think a lot of people were upset in Michael's camp because of the press conference from the Houston police. It was, I don't know how to describe it other than it was completely unfair. You generally don't do that with people who are accused of things. I mean, he went after Michael's basic, moral code, and it got a lot of people upset. And really, I don't blame them.
All right, John, some NFL news to dive into here. One including Odell Beckham Jr. Newsday is reporting that the Giants prefer an extension rather than to trade him. But what do you make of the owner's comments about him over the weekend? And then there's some reports that he won't step on the field unless he gets an extension. Is there a ugly storm brewing over the Giants and Odell Beckham?
Yeah, I mean, this could go pretty quickly as well. I could see them trading him. You're talking about a guy who wants to be, and he said on the record, he wants to be the highest paid player in football. So, even if this was, and that was before the video coming out recently of him doing some untoward things, but even before that, I mean, you just don't understand how the NFL works if you're a wide receiver and you think you're going to be the highest paid player in football. That's just unrealistic. So that's number one. And remember, the Giants have been trying. Nobody questions the talent of OBJ's tremendous player, maybe the most explosive receiver in the league when he's on the field, when he's healthy, and when he's got his head straight. Unfortunately, there's been so many issues of him losing his cool on the field. You go back to when he punched the wall at Lambeau Field after the Giants lost in the playoffs. You have an old regime of Jerry Reese and Ben McAdoo that is no longer there, who have tried to talk to him again and again about growing up, and now you have a new regime. And my whole thing is the Giants are not ready to win. They're just not. They're rebuilding. They're changing defenses. They just traded Jason Pierre-Paul. Ultimately, I think they're going to draft a quarterback at number 2 overall. When they get to the point that where they're going to be a legitimate contender again, you know, Odell Beckham is not necessarily going to be where he is right now from a talent perspective. So if you can get significant draft capital back, I could certainly see them just trying to walk away from the problem. The issue is, how much can you get for a guy? Now, the talent, as I said, is off the charts, but you also, and this is the part everyone forgets, and it's pretty simple, a new team also has to sign him to that extension. And it's a guy who wants to be the highest paid player, never mind the highest paid receiver. Probably will be the highest paid receiver. So that's a significant contract on top of giving up, say, a first-round pick. And people talk about Keyshawn Johnson back in the day, who got 2 number ones. Well, A, the league has changed. That's not going to happen. There's too many smart teams. And B, as I said, with his contract demands, nobody's given up 2 first-round picks on top of having to pay him that type of money.
John, will stay in the NFC East, and over in Dallas, Stephen Jones says the team still needs to talk to Dez Bryant about his contract. Do you see Dez back in Big D this season?
Yeah, I mean, if he is, something's got to be worked out. They can't pay Dez Bryant what he's scheduled under the cap. The problem from the Cowboys' perspective is they just cut him. They take on a ton of dead money. But I talked a lot on this show with Mike. You know, people think Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant was once an all-pro player. He was once one of the best 2 or 3 receivers in the league. He hasn't been that for the last 3 seasons ever since he got injured. In fact, he's been a below-average receiver in this league. But he's paid like a wide receiver 1. And the Cowboys just signed Allen Hurns. They're trying to bring in other receivers. It's pretty clear they know Dez Bryant is no longer Dez Bryant. But they can't take on all that dead money with their cap issues. So the best case for both teams would be, both sides would be to work out a restructured deal, but then ego comes into it. Ultimately, the Cowboys might have to release Dez Bryant and just take on all that dead money because they simply can't pay him what his 2018 cap number is.
John McMullen, like all guests, appearing via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. There's plenty more on the NFL and the Eagles. The draft is on the way. Read John's piece on Nick Foles right now at 97.3ESPN.com. John, it's always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, guys.